So just a high-level summary to point out what the relevant updates are. And before we get into the discussion, we'd like to tee up our first polling question. We have a couple of polling questions for you in the audience. Would really appreciate your response to this, and be very interesting to see the numbers that we come up with here. So the first question is, where is your organization with respect to QTL implementation? No plans to implement currently, planning to start implementing sometime in the coming year, currently piloting, so starting to implement, or fully implemented. All new trials are expected to have QTLs, or most, or what we're planning to do is now implemented. Or number 5, you don't know, we're not sure. So let's take a minute or so and let people respond to that. And then we'll take a look at what the numbers are. As we're waiting, panelists, in the summary, were there any other specific updates that I didn't mention that are notable from your perspective?
From my side, the fact that the new wording also speaks about reporting risks in addition to the deviations is something that's I will need to wrap my head around what kind of impact it has and how to understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. That is an interesting one.
It almost seems like they want to have the full picture, right? So these were the risks identified. This is what an outcome is from a data point of view. These are the mitigations that we had put in place, something like that. So more the holistic story rather than just one blurb on deviations. That's how I read it. But yeah.
Well, certainly when they come in to do inspections, that's the question they ask. What was your plan?
Exactly.
What were you looking at? What happened? So maybe it's simply helping everybody make sure they've got it documented. Because if it's not documented, it didn't happen.
Yep. Exactly. Catherine, Sophie, do we have the results of the poll yet, or are we still working on it? Okay, we're getting results in on our end. We don't see the audience view, so we're getting a transcription of it. So no plans to implement currently, 7%. That's interesting.
Is that higher or lower, Steve, than you were thinking?
You know what? For that one, personally, it doesn't surprise me one way or the other, I don't think, in terms of no plans to implement. I would suggest for those that don't yet have any plans to implement that certainly you should be starting to think about it. I'm sure we would all agree with that. Planning to start implementing in the coming year, 15%. So I guess that means not started yet, but planning to. Piloting, 14%. Fully implemented, 58%. And don't know or not sure, 6%. So interesting, of our current audience, that's indicating to me over 70%, just over 70% are either piloting or fully implementing QTLs. That's an interesting result. Linda, I know you were involved in the tough.
Yeah, I was going to say those numbers. I was a little concerned when I only saw 14% piloting, but then when I saw how many have implemented, it's actually quite a bit higher than the tough study that Ken was talking about yesterday, where those were in the high, 48, 49%, depending on what component of QTL. That because again, that study really broke down into 31 components, and I think there were 4, I think perhaps, that were QTL related. So that's a lot higher.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and not sure what to make of that, other than Could it be that the audience specific to this RBQM Live are people that are already very interested in RBQM specifically, and so that might be biasing the higher numbers we see here. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I mean, and the tough study was closed, earlier this year, so it's pretty current data. But maybe just between February and now, more has happened. So
exactly,
that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everyone for responding to that. Really interesting numbers on that one. So let's go ahead and jump into. Whoops, I went a little too fast there. Let's go ahead and jump into the panel discussion, and we have a few topics that we're going to tee up for our panelists here today to discuss. First, as we noted and saw, the obvious, the primary update is the removal of the word quality tolerance limit and replacing it with acceptable ranges. So I'm going to ask the panelists, and Marcin, starting with you on this one, do you see any benefits with the proposed removal of the term QTL and replacing it with acceptable ranges? Thoughts on that?
No, my thoughts will be quick because honestly, I don't see the benefits. I don't know. Do you?
Potentially, I've heard some people express some thoughts of benefits.
I can maybe touch on one, Steve, if that's okay. The only thing that I can think of that might be helpful is that it speaks maybe to what it is better, in a sense of quality tolerance limits might be a little bit more abstract to some, while what is within an acceptable range is maybe something that more people can relate to. That's the only thing that I can think of.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it sounds like in general, though, you're not seeing too much benefit as well.
Yeah, I mean,
no, agree.
If I can add in there, I do think, having sat in on lots of industry discussions, people use the term QTL to mean both parameters, what's actually being measured, and the limits. And so it maybe does kind of remove that confusion that people have been referring to QTLs, not just in their range or limit capacity, but the actual item that is being measured.
Yeah, agree. Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, I mean, Marcin, since you asked me the question, I'll jump in and say, yeah, I'm not sure on balance, and we'll discuss. I'm sure all of you will discuss it. I don't know if I have strong opinion one way or the other on the removal. I see both. I do see some benefit in the sense that there's been a tendency to, I think, overinterpret the term QTL with respect to its roots in manufacturing process control methodology, and so I think that has led to, at least not everywhere, but kind of maybe an expectation on interpretation that's a little too strict, that doesn't really fit with where clinical trials are not assembly lines, right? They're all very unique, and so it leads to some level of confusion or doubt about the applicability of historic benchmarks to any given prospective trial, and how strictly to interpret that. So that would be one area that I would say, yeah, maybe there's some good in moving away from that, but.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Like that sometimes we were thinking about quality tolerance limits in clinical trials, like they would result in like batch release or no batch release, directly stemming from the manufacturing process control.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So just the flip side of that question, do you see any concerns with the proposed removal of the term QTL and replacing it with acceptable ranges? And I guess, Marion, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, actually, I do. I think one is a little bit related to the what we just discussed, right? Is we just started to gain momentum in people understanding what we meant by quality tolerance limits. We have invested so much in it as an industry to get more clarity on that. A lot of articles and publications have been on the topic, and now you change it. So now it's again figuring out, okay, so how is it different? So that's one. I think that's the least of my concern, to be honest, because that could be relatively easy fixed. What I really think is a concern is there is no mention whatsoever in the new version about the relationship with the statistical design of a study. And one of the things, and where I see how we currently go about quality tolerance limits, is where you apply them linked to the statistical characteristics of a trial. A clinical trial is a scientific project, and people sometimes forget about that. And that's where we've also seen at Janssen the added value. It's not easy. You really have to think about how you do that. But then if you get it right, it adds so much added value. And with the removal of that, I think there may be less others that are not or have not yet seen the benefit of it, are not there yet, might now be less tempted to implement that in that particular way, and therefore will not see the benefit of it. So that's, I think, the biggest concern that I have with this.
Oh, very, very interesting. So I just went back to the language I think that you're referring to, Marion. In R2, it says taking into consideration the medical and statistical characteristics of the variables. So that's, I guess, what you're
exactly
referring to, and then that description has also been removed along with the word quality tolerance limits. Yeah.
Yes, and it's in a sense, right? You go back to a lot of things that we already do. We have acceptable ranges in the time that sites may take to enter their data in the system, but these are more arbitrary ranges that we find or have, that we find acceptable, rather than it being directly linked to the clinical trial itself, if you will.
Yeah.
Can I add something, Steve?
Please, Linda. Yes.
I think it's unfortunate that the word quality has been dropped, because that will often drive behavior, get senior management attention, and we now don't have the word quality embedded that as a reminder that that's really the focus. What are the most important quality things we should be worried about? And not sure how that we get that back in there, but it's one of those really subtle things that could make a difference.
Yeah, it's probably. I mean, it's no. I think it's a really interesting point, and it's probably more of an emphasis thing, right? Because this paragraph is immediately preceded by identify risks associated with critical to quality factors, and then set acceptable ranges. So quality is in the overall context, but I agree it's not nearly as well emphasized now in this proposed update. So yeah, very interesting. Marcin, anything to add in terms of?
Yeah, sure.
How much time do we have?
Yeah, exactly. That was my point, Steve.
So I was looking today at the Transcelerate papers about QTLs, and the first one was published in 2017. I was part of that working group, so it means if it was published 2017, we were probably working on this 2015, 2016. And for me, I remember those times when we were trying to wrap our heads what actually quality tolerance limits may mean for a clinical study. And that was extremely long and painful process. Moreover, when Professor Getz was speaking yesterday, he was speaking also about that adoption of almost anything in our industry takes 20 years, which is a generation, like a little bit worrying. So in this context, what I see as my biggest concern is that we are implementing a new phrase, a new concept, and to try to understand what it means for the industry will take a lot of time and effort and periods of uncertainty and people working on projects to come up, writing papers, interpreting that, and so on. So I see two options. Either we consider or assume that the acceptable ranges are the same as QTLs, then what is the benefit of changing the name? Or we assume that it's something different, which means that we have to spend the time and the effort to define it as a new term. So that's my key concern. I understand because Chris McDavid earlier today was speaking about more freedom that the R3 is giving than R2, at least in this draft language. But I think I would love if this freedom was given in a little bit different way, like the sponsor may decide to, rather than the sponsor should, and then there is a term that is really broad and difficult to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
It's actually a good point, I think, Marcin, in that I first thought that as well. When I read it first, you think, oh, it's not so descriptive, so you can have a little bit more flexibility in how you implement things. But then if you really read it through, because of the simplification of it, it also becomes more unclear as to what it is. So you have to figure out more of the details yourself when you start implementing. What do they mean? So for me, it creates more uncertainty than it does more clarity on what the expectations are.
Yeah. So really, I guess, an unnecessary, feels like an unnecessary disruption to, given all the time and effort that it's taken the industry to really get their heads around quality tolerance limits, and now we're throwing a curveball, a parent curveball, like you're saying, right?
Well, I certainly appreciated when Dave Nickerson yesterday shared that the expert working group has a strong recommendation that there's going to be a major education component that will be needed. And hopefully there'll be, if it moves forward as it is in the draft, that there will be a stronger industry education effort, as opposed to lots of pockets and people in different places thinking different things, et cetera. But that might be wishful thinking. But at least they acknowledge, Marcin, your point, which is, well, we spent quite a while to get where we are, and now you're going to start all over again.
Yeah. Yep. So, I'm already aware from conversations, as I'm sure you are, that a number of people providing formal feedback on the R3 are making this particular request or plea. Can we reinstate quality tolerance limits, or the words quality tolerance limits? Not necessarily everyone is on the same page with that, but I personally, I've heard from many and also agree. It seems like overall potentially an unnecessary disruption that kind of is going to cause a lot of additional or new work to rally people around it. Okay, very good. So the next question I'm going to move to another slide for a backdrop here, but a number of publications have discussed the relationship between KRIs, key risk indicators, and QTLs, including an article recently published in DIA Journal, Tiers, that all of us on this panel contributed to. And so we, along with others, have positioned QTLs as a designated or special subset of KRIs, focused on the most important systemic risks to the study. So the question I have for the panel here is, does the removal of QTL introduce concerns with the ability to maintain this distinction of QTLs as a special subset? Now we're calling it acceptable ranges. We don't have QTLs anymore as the label. So Linda, I'll throw that one to you to start.
Thanks, Steve. Well, to give a little more background on this, I like the fact you've picked up these three articles that are really trying to establish from those who are thinking about QTLs or using QTLs that they are a subset. And I think there was sort of a divergence of views developing in the industry a few years ago, where some were saying anything that's a study level KRI has to have a QTL limit put on it. And those that were implementing and farther along on the adoption of QTLs said, well, no, because we need to focus on the most important things. We need a subset, and not everything you're looking at a study level really falls into that QTL kind of a definition. So that's part of what Martian was talking about earlier, that we're evolving the concept forward, and we want to make sure that this differentiation between things that are really needing to be reported as substantial deviations is kept in mind, because I think that the point of the article that we were all involved with TIERS, which was really summarizing a meeting we all had with the FDA from, was early adopters giving feedback to the regulators about, we've been doing this QTL stuff for a while, and we're really concerned about the ability of everybody to implement these if we can't really narrow down and just have a small subset that are considered in that QTL capacity. Because if you measure, if everything's important, then nothing's important.
Yeah, and Linda, I think that was also my earlier point, is the lack in the current or in the updated version, it misses the link with the medical and the statistical characteristics of the clinical trials, because these typically point to what is the most important from a patient safety point of view, but also from quality and integrity of the data point of view. So,
right.
yeah.
I think it seemed that in our various conversations over the years, looking at sort of what are those things that are going to drive your evaluable patient number, are things that are going to come out of the assumptions that were made and the statistical analysis plan. And these were sort of areas that the group collectively was focusing on. But it didn't mean they weren't, you guys are also still doing other review of, key indicators.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think you mentioned earlier, Marion, that, looking at time to data entry for a site. Well, there's been quite a lot of debate. Oh, is that something you should look at a study level? Is that really a QTL? And someone said, well, the data's all in the end, it doesn't matter. But, there are sort of ways that we use study level and site level KRIs just to oversee and manage operations. So, that's a great example of something that doesn't have to be a QTL, but it's important to be monitoring, because if all the sites are late at entering their data and you're relying on centralized monitoring to oversee and manage, your data is really old. That's a risk in and of it, like an oversight risk. So, these KRIs are being used for different purposes, and they can be related to each other. They can support drill down, drill up. And that stuff's all still happening, but what are the most important things that need to be reported as deviations is a special category.
So just to add or reinforce the point there, and I think the example is one we've used before. I think it's a really good one to really highlight this question. And visit to entry cycle time, right? The timeliness of data entry at sites is something, in our experience, it's a standard key risk indicator used across most trials for most of our clients anyway, most organizations. And it makes sense, right? We want to make sure, and the study team's going to set some sort of limit on that, some threshold that says if a site is averaging more than 10 days, let's say, or 15 days, I'm going to flag that site for follow-up. And you, for similar reasons, you may want to monitor that at a study systemic level. At a study level, what's my overall average? Because you're doing that, sounds like an acceptable range that you're setting on something, because it's some identified risk, standard risk in the trial that you want to manage. Is there some implication with this new R3 language that you're supposed to then include that in the umbrella of what they're describing? And I think the answer you're saying is no. We should be able to say, no, that's not something that we're looking at as a critical to quality risk, or a key one, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, certainly if there's if there's data quality problems, you're going to pick those up through a different measurement.
Right.
And also I think the threshold setting for what is acceptable, Steve, is much more arbitrary for some of the KRIs that you use than the concept of the quality tolerance limits, at least at the sense that we have discussed it previously, again, with that link to the medical and statistical consideration of a clinical trial.
Yep. Makes perfect sense. Marcin, anything to add from your end on this one?
I subscribe to what Marion and Linda said 100%.
Great. Okay,
Can I just add one more thing?
Yeah, please.
We haven't really thrown in here, but when you look back at some of the data that Ken was sharing yesterday, and think about all the new types of trial designs coming, which was partly why this update is going forward. It's going to be very important to really think about what are these processes that are new, who are the players that, it might be a standard process, but now because of diversity, we're bringing in all sorts of investigators that are naive investigators. There's all these new risks that could impact quality coming with some of the hybrid DCT trials, et cetera. We've got vendors that have never tracked this stuff before. And so, really understanding where these risks are and what they really could do for derailing a study is really important. And so trying to get a handle on it for a normal trial, a more traditional trial is paramount, because all this data coming in from, the mobile devices, et cetera. I mean, it's really critical that we quickly get this figured out. Yes, it's fine to have some flexibility, and but how do we bring this into the new environment? We have no clue how to set some of those levels, as you said, Marion, and just sort of wondering, what are you guys already implementing these in these more unusual settings?
Yeah, I think for that in particular, I think it's important to say, okay, what with these new strategies, it's think about how do we collect the data, and what in that whole route of the data collection can potentially go wrong, and how are we able to detect it, and what is the impact at the end of how we can do the analysis as planned, right? So again, I think it boils back to, if we implement this or we use a new vendor that we have not worked with before, what is it that they do? What is it? Are they collecting endpoint data? Then you have a whole different way maybe of handling it, putting mitigations in place. Then it's if it's an exploratory endpoint that you are gathering or something else. Right. So again, I think you have to clearly link it to the critical to quality factors to be able to determine the importance, and then look at that whole process from a mitigation point of view.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. I agree. By the way, in the meantime, I understand that there has been some technical difficulties during the session. I think they've been mostly worked out, but one of the technical difficulties is that the second polling question was automatically launched and already answered.
Oh, that's good, maybe, no?
So I'm going to go ahead and just share with you the results of that one.
That is funny.
So the second polling question was, and let me go to it. Here's the second polling question. Overall, how do you view the proposed R3 updates related to QTL? So beneficial, a welcome update, neutral, concerning, disruptive, confusing, etc., or not sure, no opinion. So those were the four choices. And thank you, even though I didn't ask anyone to answer it, that for those of you that answered it, it looks like we got a good set of responses here. The result is beneficial, 22%, neutral, 31%, concerning, 27%, and not sure or no opinion, 19%. So it's actually pretty balanced on both the beneficial and concerning side, which is really interesting. And maybe the summary is for this result we're getting from the audience today is not sure.
Well, and I would be interested to know, right, who thinks it's beneficial or not. Is it right? Because if I look at just from my own perspective, we've seen the added value of the quality tolerance limits per the R2 version, if you will. And it's been, in my opinion, much more added value than I could have anticipated upfront.
Yeah.
So I would be interested to see that those maybe have less concern with the change, have not yet seen the added value of implementing the quality tolerance limits linked to the critical to quality factors, linked to the medical statistical characteristics of a clinical trial. Right. If you've not seen that, then maybe you're less concerned with it, is what I can imagine. But that's obviously an assumption because we don't have the data to look into that. But yeah,
absolutely. I'm going to move on to the next question. So see if we can leave 10 or 15 minutes for audience Q&A, which is coming in pretty actively, by the way, which is great. Keep those questions coming. Just any thoughts on the removal of the word predefined, the proposed removal? Do you make anything of that? I know from a lot of the discussions post R2 that there was certainly a point of discussion in some of the work groups that I've been involved in, I know, and I'm sure you guys as well, and maybe in your organizations. Do you have any thoughts on, or anything meaningful in the removal of that word predefined? And I'm going to start with Marcin on that one. Marcin, can I pick on you?
So sure. For me, the removal of the word predefined is not a key change over here. However, I think that the predefinition of quality tolerance limits or acceptable ranges is one of the valuable aspects of the whole idea. And this is because I think we are, the predefined removed our standard or typical way of working in clinical trials. So, and typical way of working in clinical trials is that usually we have upfront zero acceptance for any error. So, like, if I remember the old times, we were planning any clinical study and we were thinking, oh, okay, what about subjects lost to follow-up or ineligible subjects randomized? So the discussion at the beginning, we have zero tolerance for that, zero. And then as the study progressed and these cases were starting to come in, we were handling this on case-by-case basis. Like, let's do retraining in order for this not to repeat at the same site, the same place, the same area. And we were quite often missing the point where this was not a collection of single cases, but people were doing something wrong, or some errors were committed because things could not be done right. That's why they were done in a wrong way. And the predefinition of quality tolerance limits or predefinition of acceptable range gives you this opportunity to think up front. So when will my problems not be a series of cases anymore, but be a symptom of something that affects everybody or most of your study or program? So I don't think that's an awful thing that the word predefined was removed, but in my opinion, if you want to set any quality tolerance limits or any acceptable thresholds, you have to think about what they are before you start what you're doing. Otherwise, like, they are just movable goals.
So it's in a way you're saying it kind of goes without saying. You don't need to say they should be predefined. It's
But that's true, Steve, if you are a scientist like Marcin, right? So
Yeah.
all scientists would fully agree with you, Marcin, that's the logic approach.
Right.
Including me. Absolutely.
Well, Mary and Linda, anything else to
I mean,
add?
I think just to Marcin's point, I know when we started to look at how does implementing RBQM change your planning, conduct, and closeout processes, and we started to, do process maps, we had quite a debate about where the SAP finalized event box, where it should go. Because in many cases, people were just starting studies and we're going to have the SAP done before we start analyzing the data. And so this was one of the interesting sort of things people hadn't thought about was the fact that you really had to change that whole process in addition to others. And then some people, if you're relying on the SAP to be able to set limits, they didn't exist yet. So
sounds very familiar.
Yes.
Exactly. So just I mean, I know some of the discussions coming out of R2 when people looked at the word predefined were wondering if it should be interpreted as, oh, well, if I have an ongoing study and I haven't defined QTLs yet, is it okay to implement them mid-study, or am I violating the ICH language that says they have to be predefined? What if I think they should be updated, or the thresholds updated during the study based on knowledge I've gained? Is there any concern about doing that because of the word predefined? Any quick comments on that? I mean, what are your thoughts on those concerns?
I think implementing them even mid-study is more added value than not doing it. So that's one. So I would not be too sensitive to that predefined at the beginning. And I think one is, as an industry, we're still learning how to set the thresholds. And then specifically for the more complex quality tolerance limits that you might have in place, it's a journey, right, to get that right. And you have learnings throughout the study where it may make sense with new insights that you have to change that. Or there may be significant changes to a protocol that prompts a new threshold to be set. So also there, I think, yeah.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I guess maybe the most important thing is, okay, well, if you introduce something or change a QTL definition during study, go ahead and do it. Just document why you did it. Have the documentation for what you did and why. Right.
Just like we amend protocols. We amend
Exactly.
protocols, change them. We just clarify why we do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And in fact, I mean, I think when we look at RBQM implementation survey data, we see people are getting pretty good at the planning upfront piece. And I think we're still embracing what do we do during conduct and doing those reassessments and actually doing something as a result of those reassessments is slow coming at this point. So I think that has to go hand in hand with, something new pops up, a new risk you hadn't even identified could come up that might need to be looked at.
Makes sense. I have one final question for you guys before we get into the audience Q&A, and that is with regard to the word important deviation or the phrase important deviations, right? Because that hasn't changed in the proposed R3 language. It's still there, but it's still language that a lot of people are focused on and particularly trying to interpret what is meant by an important deviation versus just any deviation to a QTL or acceptable range. Any thoughts on that? What do you see as an important deviation? And Linda, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's obviously what people are concerned about, and I think people are going to define that in different ways, and where people get most concerned is, will my interpretation or understanding of important deviation align with regulators? So as with any of these things, when they come into play, you get early adopters, and then people kind of wait on the sidelines to see, has it been through inspection? What did they say? We heard it in the panel this morning, those questions coming up. And I think that sort of educational component is going to be key to defining what important deviations are. And the one I think, people like my other panelists have been really good about sort of sharing some examples. Here's what we're doing. But where we really need some a bigger emphasis in the industry, or even just start really surveying and getting good data. Marion, you mentioned, the fact you guys had implemented QTLs has had more of an impact than you thought it might.
Yeah.
I think we need to tease out what are those impacts. That's what kind of helps the people on the sideline kind of come in. And, whenever something major happens in a study and it hits the news, something gets stopped, mid-trial, things like that. I think it would be awesome if organizations could share, because we were monitoring and doing this quality oversight, we recognized a problem way earlier than we would have, that it might instill more trust, that there is quality oversight going on, that we recognize, how many times do we go in and correct something that we might not have seen before? That's the kind of information we need to help define what's an important deviation and how it's going to drive the overall quality of the trial, I think.
A little bit of a sideway into that, because we talk about important deviations, but it's also good to realize that there is importance in deviations, right? So if you clinical trials, at the end, what you want to do is have a really good, realistic insight in what is the efficacy of my study drug, medical device, or whatever you're testing, and how safe is it, right? What's the safety profile? Those things typically are the two things that you want to have a good measurement on. When your study drug or device is being approved, it's going out there, and you have medical doctors go use it for their patients. They don't use it similar or as strict as in the protocol. So you also don't want your outcomes to be so significantly different then when things are not followed precisely, that then all of a sudden it's not effective enough, or there are more safety concerns than maybe you thought. So some of these deviations that happen help get you to a more realistic measurement of your efficacy and your safety profile. So again, there is about what are the acceptable ranges here. That's the importance of knowing where do we need to sit. What is that boundary where you get the best outcome?
Yep. Yeah, makes sense. Marcin, anything to add?
I think that Marion over here quite interestingly introduced a topic that we could talk about for another hour or two: over quality in clinical trials. Does such thing exist? So, Steve, up to you. Do you want to dive there, or
No,
I wish we had another hour or two. That would be actually, but we don't, unfortunately. No, it's really good. I'm going to real quick. I just want to ask a real quick and ask for a brief. It could even be as simple as yes or no. But just let's take a minute on this one. Do you anticipate any changes to how QTLs are implemented in your organization as a result of the proposed updates in R3? Marion, start with you.
No.
No. Okay. Marcin, how about you?
Very minimal. Will be probably chasing a little bit less the QTLs in very small studies.
Yep. Linda, what do you see? I know you're not at a sponsor organization or CRO, but
right.
What are
I
your
think in talking with organizations that are well on the way to implementing QTLs or fully implemented, they across the board say no change, that they feel what they're doing meets the requirements and they're going to continue along that way.
Yep. Makes sense to me. I think I would agree. I would expect not, pretty much stay the course with the interpretation. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, guys. We're going to jump into the Q&A session now. We still have at least 10 or 12 minutes left, so we can get through some of the questions. As I said, we received a lot of questions I can see coming in throughout today's session, which is fantastic. Any questions that we don't have a chance to address during the live session, we will gladly follow up with directly with the individuals who asked them. So thanks again for all the questions that you have coming in. So I'm going to take the first one I see here. Someone is asking, is it central monitors who are reviewing deviations to QTLs, or is it a different group or set of people that are doing that? Anyone want to take a shot at that?
I can say briefly. At GSK, we started with statisticians being the monitors of quality tolerance limits, and then after the creation of the central monitoring group, we shifted this to central monitors, and that's about monitoring the parameters. But review of a deviation, like a review of the status, is always cross-functional. You have to talk about this with the all members of the central study team, or however this is called.
Yep, makes sense.
Similar
Marion, is that?
Yeah, that's similar. So we have the central monitors monitor it as part of the whole, everything else that they do with regards to central monitoring, so they can have that complete picture. But then, Marcin, to your point, I think it's setting the QTLs, including the thresholds. It's then determining when you have a breach, what's the impact, that then prompts a cross-functional discussion with a significant statistical input needed. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. Does the QTL's position depend on the risk assessment and mitigation resources, considering the range of the metric is caused by historical data? I'm not sure. Does anyone want to take that?
I hear a little bit of different things connected to each other.
Yeah.
It's obviously linked to a risk assessment.
Right.
Right. You determine upfront what is critical. And that's, I think, to Linda's point, you would like to have your statistical analysis plan ready, because that's kind of the framework that points to what is most critical, and then you take it from there.
Yeah, I'm
Steve,
trying to interpret.
Part of the question may be one that I hear frequently, which is, can small organizations that don't have a lot of data implement QTLs? And I think if you're going to drive because they don't have a lot of data to set thresholds, what do? But I think if you go with the assumption that you're going to be pulling things out of the statistical analysis plan, you should be okay.
Then you do, yeah. And I agree, Linda. I was thinking it's that the question may be in that area as well. And I would agree. I mean, there's, for organizations in general, and probably more so for smaller organizations, that's a challenge, right? Of having a repository of references, benchmarks for a given prospective study in which to even. But if you're looking at the statistical design of the study, and that I have a recruitment plan that I'm gonna randomize 550 patients, and I need 500 completers, I can accept no more than 10% before I start risking, power of my endpoint analysis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that sets a requirement for you. It's a very clear requirement for the study that you may start risking reliability of trial results or interpretability of trial results if you don't achieve that limit, even though that estimate of 10% attrition may not have been based on specific benchmark data. I think there's a term we use called profound wisdom or knowledge.
Tribal knowledge. Yeah.
Tribal knowledge that is used to that says, hey, we anticipate up to 10% attrition here, so we're gonna.
Maybe what I wanted to add to that, Steve, is I think knowing that the pace of change of how we do clinical trials is going, in my opinion at least, higher rather than slowing down.
Yeah.
That also means that you have a very small window of looking in historical data that still makes sense to be applicable for the study or new study at hand. So yeah, I know that sometimes it's easy to use that as a starting point, and at least you have something that you can hold on to and have something to use as a starting point. I'm not convinced personally that that's moving forward the best way to set these type of thresholds.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Interesting. Agreed. Here's another question. Do you think there is a perception for breached QTLs, or where deviations happen, that the study was not of enough quality, no matter what mitigation steps you might have taken? So I guess the question here is around, do we have concerns about reporting deviations or apparent deviations, even if we concluded that they had no negative impact on the trial, that it's creating a perception that my trial had a lot of quality issues?
I see a lot of fear about that, especially like during the trial. I think sometimes we may see a situation where when we are approaching the thresholds of a QTL, there is a temptation. Let's update the QTL to avoid the deviation. I think those fears are not really necessary. I always recommend to let's, by common sense, understand whether we have a systematic issue, and then let's do something about that, or not. I think the moment that you are already focused on some area and you are trying to deeply understand what's going on and whether you have systematic problem, then already the QTL has served you. And whether what you put in the clinical study report should be just a reflection of what you did about that. That's what the regulation says, at least the R2.
Yeah.
So
Agree.
I think there is always such worry, but I don't think I have ever seen such cases where a deviation in QTL was hurting the study significantly. But I saw cases where studies were hurt significantly by issues that were just never caught during the course of the study and never reported anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's true, right? If you don't have these quality tolerance limits, you may have the breaches, you just don't know that you have them. So you have right, and that can be found or can come out later, and then maybe too late for you to do something about it.
Yeah.
We've already had a few examples where we were very early on being able to detect what looked like to become a systemic issue. We'll be able to put the right mitigation in place, and then you see it turning around in the right way for the remainder of the study.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that if we've not done it, then you end up at a whole different level, more closer and much more complex to then get it back into a good compliance.
I think as probably all of us have observed or commented, none of any concerns here or worries about perception should discourage anyone from moving forward and implementing acceptable ranges / QTLs for their study to look for systemic risks that are important, right? As you know, one way of saying is what could be more important than monitoring for systemic risks that might undermine the reliability of my trial or patient safety.
It also helps you, Steve, it also helps you to know when you need to take action.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. One last quick question, and then I think we have to wrap up. If you're drafting a quality risk management procedures or plan for a startup company at this point in time, would you include the term QTL, given that the R3 language has removed that nomenclature?
I would, because for the term QTL, you have plenty of papers, many of you put as references over here, because then you can show this is what we are talking about. When we are speaking about acceptable ranges, then nobody knows what that actually is.
Yep.
Agree.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and to make another point, which is R3 is a draft. It's not finalized.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Linda, actually.
We don't know. And listening to Dave talk about the process yesterday, it's going to be well into next year before they
really have to wait,
feedback.
right?
So,
yeah,
people should not be taking action based on a draft. At this point, you could put QTLs, or acceptable. You could put both languages in there, but
I agree.
It's not ratified at this point.
R2 is the effective ICH guideline right now,
Yeah.
so we can't know definitively what's going to be in R3 at this point. So thanks so much again, everyone. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you again to our panelists. This is a fantastic discussion, and thank you to our audience for joining us today, engaging. And with the poll questions, I thought that was really fantastic engagement and feedback. If you'd like to request a recording of today's session, please reach out via email to contact@CluePoints.com. We'll be happy to provide you with that. We also welcome you to join the RBQM Chat Cafe, where we will continue discussion on this session. Beginning at 11:10 a.m., please join our final session of RBQM Live 2023, Understanding the RBQM Process and Documentation Phase, Central Monitoring and Risk-Based Study Execution, featuring panelists from BMD, BioNTech, and Bayer. Thanks a lot, everyone, and enjoy the last session. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.